Welcome back to Brashonomics. Here talking real estate on Monday. Who better to talk real estate with, especially if you're out buying a house, than Lisa Hampton, the lead buyer specialist with Home Helper Consultants. Lisa, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. You got your bling, girl.
I did.
Missing.
Can you see it?
Not probably if you're listening on the radio, but if they're watching the videos, man, is that sparkly?
It's that sparkly that you can hear it.
You can hear it sparkling. Lisa, a lot of people look for houses that are sparkly and perfect for themselves. And when you're out looking at houses with people, a lot of people maybe see the sparkle and the sizzle of something that's really cool and pretty. But are they leaving out other aspects potentially when they're out house hunting?
Definitely, and we learn more with every single buyer. Like, the fun part is finding the house. And then after that, so many buyers just put it in the agent's hands to move forward and think that everything's going to be handled. And it's so important that they take more responsibility for what's going on. Your agent is there to guide you, keeping that in mind, but it's also decisions that you have to make. For most people, it's the biggest purchase they're going to make. And so they definitely have to do that. But then also, they need to be educated with what happens after you find the house. What is that process going to look like? And in addition, it's more than just finding the house. You have to think about, like you and Jared talked about earlier, the projects that are going to need to be done after you move in, and realistically, are you going to do them?
And when you're working with buyers, I mean, sometimes do they understand what costs may be associated with some of those projects?
I don't think so.
No? Or is it more, I was on Home Depot, I can get tile for 99 cents a tile, so redoing this bathroom is going to cost $24.
Oh, and everybody can do it themselves.
Sure.
It's on Google. It's on the internet. Definitely you can do it yourself.
Right.
Now, it's a good idea to research those projects, too. I mean, as far as what's it going to cost to paint the interior of a house if you do it yourself or if you hire someone. And I know I love painting things, but my paint job is a little less than perfect. So if you're buying a house, it might be a good idea to hire someone. And what's that going to cost you? Because a lot of people, especially first-time home buyers, they put everything they have into their down payment and then to pay for their closing costs, and they move into their house and they're dead broke, which we don't advise, by the way. But then they don't have money to fix things. Because we do inspections too, of course. But I can guarantee every inspector is going to miss something. There may be something that just wasn't visible that a month after you move in, something breaks. And then all of a sudden you don't have a washer or you don't have a stove. So it's a good idea to always have a cushion there to help fix those things. There
seems to be a lot of within a house, there's certainly a lot of different pieces or parts that can go wrong. Is there a dollar amount or a recommendation that you have, a percentage of a house price? I know in the mortgage industry, we try to recommend have at least 2 to 3 months of reserves for all your bills, or 6 in some cases.
Yeah, I'd feel better with 6, but I wouldn't say there's a necessary amount to have in reserves, but something. If they're following lender guidelines and they have 3 to 6 months in reserves, they're probably going to have enough to make those repairs. But I would say at least plan on about 10% of your mortgage payment, just making sure that you have that put away every month for the little things that go wrong.
Or improvements. I mean, sometimes it may be, well, this isn't necessarily how I want this to look. We need a new couch.
Yeah. And then also, one of the things we've been doing, speaking of couches, I'm glad you brought that up, but...
Of course.
I know. You're so intuitive. But what we've been doing, too, is with our buyers, because inspections take 3-4 hours, and buyers come and they have a tendency to follow the inspector around and find all the things that are wrong with them. This is a great 3 to 4 hours for them to go through the house, draw a map, start placing your furniture. Is your sectional really going to fit in that living room? And do you need to buy new things? Because you can start making a list of what some of those expenses are going to be.
And then I'm really totaling them up because they do add up over time.
They do.
Or as the list grows, I suppose.
And the list always grows. I mean, whether it's...
What are some of the things you see on a list sometimes?
My very favorite one, somebody put aside money because they had a self-cleaning cat box. So they had to install an extra water hookup and flushing system in a certain spot.
There's self-cleaning cat boxes?
Yes. So if you have a cat, I guess I recommend getting it, but I'd never heard it before.
On Shark Tank, they actually had the city kitty where the cat would go on the toilet and flush the toilet.
They've had that forever.
Well, I just found out about. Obviously,
I love Shark Tank.
Yeah, it's a good show, huh?
Yeah, completely off topic, but it's fantastic. I wish I had some of those ideas.
I don't know if it's off topic because a lot of people, when they're going in to buy a house and they need to make an offer, they need to understand what the financial ramification is of making that offer. And if all of a sudden they move their offer up because they really, really want the house, but they don't understand that, well, you only qualify for X amount of dollars, so now you have to come out of pocket. This is where that list grows, and you may not be able to afford it.
Yeah, it absolutely grows. And most of the times when we work with buyers, we try not to go up to their max because we know there's going to be some cushioning there. Mm-hmm. And when we're looking at houses, if they're qualified for $400,000, we prefer not to look for houses that are $400,000 because that's going to put them at their max. And if something happens, they don't have any sort of cushion. And we're in multiple offer situations often right now. So if we have to go above list and they find their dream house at $400,000 and we end up having to offer $410,000, they can't do it.
What are some other things that buyers need to be aware of other than just finding this sparkly house?
I know, but that's so fun.
I know, right? What are some other? What are some other hurdles they may face?
One of the hurdles, you guys also talked about this a little bit earlier, is moving day. Mm-hmm. And always plan on something going wrong. Inevitably, we have buyers who have their moving truck packed. They've got all their friends who have given up their entire weekend. And then at the 11th hour, something happens. They do. I couldn't get any of mine to do it. I love my friends, for those of you who are listening, but I don't want to recruit them to do that. But they have everything lined up to move, and then 11th hour, something goes wrong, and they won't get their keys until Monday morning. Mm-hmm. And so we've now told people, don't schedule anything until you've talked to us and we've talked to your lender to find out what's going on with it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We've got some people who plan on moving early and having washers and dryers delivered 3 days before closing. Time out.
Right. So is there some timelines that maybe aren't necessarily concrete that people believe are concrete?
Yes, closing date.
Closing date?
Flat out closing date. It's not concrete
ever. And it can
ever.
Change.
It can. And it can be moved up.
Yeah.
I mean, those are the great times is when we can move it up and make it a little bit easier for them. But I never plan on the closing date staying the same because we just can't guarantee it. Underwriting guidelines are so much more difficult now that things will go wrong. I mean, that's one thing I can guarantee with any home purchase. Something is going to go haywire.
Right.
So it's just managing that.
Lisa Hampton joins us, lead buyer specialist with Home Helper Consultants. Lisa, how do you teach somebody to be more flexible throughout the process?
It's almost like being their own personal psychologist. And it's just throughout the entire process, letting them know what's going on. And with everything, we give best and worst case scenario. Mm-hmm. And really, it's preparing them for the worst case scenario because you definitely have that flexibility. And it's really worst case scenario because then when it doesn't go that wrong, it's a bonus for them and they get to be excited.
And they feel a little bit better about the whole thing.
But when you people always want to get the best case scenario. We have that problem.
Of course, that's how we operate, right? I want the best case scenario.
They do, but then they're always disappointed because everything has to fall perfectly for that to happen.
Sure. But don't most people think going in, this is going to be my dream house. I'm so excited for it. Everything's going to be perfect. I got my engagement ring. It's all bells and whistles from here. I mean, butterflies and, and then, but this really is a process by which it doesn't go perfect.
No, and that's where you have to have a good agent working with you because they're going to really, truly tell you what's going to happen. And I really emphasize buyers have to be actively involved in the process. If your agent hasn't touched base with you in 2 or 3 days, call them. Mm-hmm. Even if there isn't an update on what's going on, just call them, stay involved in the process. And your agent really should be keeping you updated.
Every 2 or 3 days, huh?
Depending on, that things move
is
so
that
quickly
often?
sometimes.
Is that really something people should expect? Is like 2 to 3 days, or is it once a week?
They should get those expectations up front. Mm-hmm. We keep in touch with our clients often throughout the process. Once it goes into underwriting, I let them know I'll give them updates, even if there isn't one, so that it's just so that they don't feel in the dark about what's going on. Mm-hmm. And they should also have things they're working on throughout the process. I mean, change your utilities. They should have a checklist as well.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you and Jared have both said that. So
yeah. I mean, you should have a checklist of what you should be doing along the way, so they should be involved.
And I would imagine if you're going about your checklist it gives you a little less time to just sit there and wonder what everybody else is doing.
And to stress out about it.
Right.
And it's just having that expectation up front of what's going on.
Sure.
That's why you need a good team you work with.
Yeah, Lisa, thanks so much for joining us again. We do have to go to break. We'll be right back to continue the conversation with all of our in-studio guests. We'll be right back.